I have been recently accepted to be a vendor at an upcoming Christmas market. And you wanna know what the problem is? I have never been a vendor at a market before. Do you wanna know what the other problem is? I don't even have any inventory to sell at this market. I put a few projects on hold because in the following weeks, I am going to be pumping out projects so that I can have something to sell. And I wanna bring you guys along for the ride. I'm gonna show you guys the good, the bad, and the ugly for all the projects that I'm building. Plus, I'm gonna bring you guys behind the scenes to see all of the prep that went into getting ready for this market, as well as tell you how much profit I made in the end. And as you can tell behind me, I have been working on quite a few projects already, so they're coming. So let's begin with part one, trivets. Well, is it trivets? 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 Trivet? No. Now, a lot of these projects began like this. Oh my God. Okay, so we have a different stuff here. I'm gonna think on what I could do with all this. I literally would just take a pile of scraps, dump them on my table, and then come up with some idea, whether it's good or bad, and see how it goes. So let's start. Now, because I'm working with a lot of scraps, a lot of it has already been jointed and planed. If there has been any pieces that need to be rejointed and planed, I did it off camera. But to start with the trivets, what we're doing is cutting our maple pieces, which are going to be our ends. Now, I did decide to do this in 2 different passes. I'm not really sure why. I could have probably just done it with one, but I was just worried about it burning a lot because, you know, digging out a lot of material. It ended up being fine. Now, moving on to our walnut pieces, we're just gonna have to cut these so that they are going to be exactly the same in terms of the width and length, or height, I guess. I'm pretty much just cutting them all down to the same width, and then I'm resetting the saw to cut them at the same length or thickness, whatever. Now that everything is kind of cut to the right width and thickness, we're going to go ahead and get the crosscut sled out so we can start cutting everything to size. So starting with the maple piece, what we're doing here is just cutting it in half. That way we have equal pieces for either end. I wonder why it's not cutting that smooth. Yep. Just what I expected. I put the blade on backwards. I was recently using a different blade, and when I switched it, I must have just put it on backwards. So now I just had to reinstall the blade and we're good to go. Just to make sure that I did actually cut it perfectly in half, I'm gonna just cut them again to the exact same size. And this gives me an opportunity to get rid of the painted end, so I can just cut that off. Now, I did some big brain maths here to figure out exactly how much space I need apart from each of them. Now, I'm doing like a dado style cut here, so I'm just gonna set the depth of the blade to roughly halfway. It doesn't have to be exact, but you don't wanna change this after you set it. Now, I'm going to cut my first line, which is, I believe, 13 millimeters or so from one end. That gives me the first cut, and I'm gonna do the same thing with the other piece before I change any of my setup blocks here. Now, with the first cut made, I'm gonna go ahead and line it up with the first piece. And I am going to be using each piece separately. That way I can make sure that it's a nice tight fit, and I'll number each piece and also the little maple piece so I know which piece goes where, into what slot. I know that was a lot of piece talk, but after I got the 2 ends cut, I'm gonna go back with the table saw and just clear out all of the material that's in between the 2 cuts I just made, and then that will make the dado. So after having all the dados cut, I basically didn't like how oddly shaped it was. It was very long. So I said, you know what? Let's make 2 trivets. What I'm doing here is taking the 2 shortest pieces of walnut, marking the center of them, and then eyeballing the center of the other pieces and then marking them as well. I'm also going to carry those numbers that I made onto both pieces so I don't forget which one was which. And then I'm going to go ahead and cut everything in half. Now with all the walnut pieces cut in half, let's go ahead and cut the base maple pieces in half so we have 4. Just gonna mark center, line it up with the saw blade, and then also set the depth of the saw blade to be as thick as the maple. Okay, so now that we have everything cut in half, let's go ahead and begin the glue up. Now, if you guys recall from before, I had 2 walnut pieces that were shorter than the rest. So I'm going to start with gluing those up. And then once I put those in, I'm going to go ahead and make sure that they are exactly the same. Now for the second maple piece, I'm going to go ahead and just eyeball it to try to make it as exact as the opposite side. That way it kind of is the same. And then for the rest of these pieces, I can just drop them in, making sure that they're about center as best as possible. But again, they don't have to be perfect because we'll sort that out later. Now off camera, I also did make sure to sand all of these down to 180 grit sandpaper. What? 180 grit. And pretty much having that done now will make it much easier after everything is glued up, because trying to get in between each of these pieces is going to be a pain in the butt. So doing it before kind of saves me that little bit of time later. Now it's pretty much rinse and repeat for the other one. And then as for clamping up, I'm going with a technique that I can reduce the amount of clamps that I need because I need them for other projects and I'm running out. So I'm putting them on top of each other and then using plywood underneath each maple piece to kind of squeeze the two together. This won't glue them together, obviously, but it will be able to apply the same amount of pressure I need for both of them. Applying the clamps on the first side wasn't that bad because I could just kind of make it overhang from the side of the table, but now for the other side, that was a little bit more of a pain in the butt. I had to use this little pressure clamp just to hold it in place. I'm not going to keep this here, just to keep it in place while I attach the other clamps to the 2 pieces of plywood. And yes, I might have over clamped it, but you know what? I had them anyway, so might as well use what I had left. All right, so next day, everything's dry and I was sanding everything down because I thought that was really the only option I had to make sure it was perfectly flat. But I will say, thank God it fit in my jointer because this saved me. I just went through it twice, then went back and drew just pencil mark all over the top, ran it through one more time to make sure that all that pencil mark got removed on one pass, meaning it's flat. And thank God that worked because it would have been annoying sanding with all these spaces in between. It was a bit of a pain in the butt. It was ripping up my sandpaper, so. All right, so now it's time to square everything up. So I'm going off of the smallest piece, basically setting that to wherever my saw is. And then I am going to, whoa, that was close. I'm going to go ahead and just cut it nice and square off the crosscut sled. Then I'll flip it over and make sure to do the exact same thing on the opposite side, still making sure that the walnut to the maple is the same distance on both of those sides. Now I'm just going to go ahead and repeat it for the second one and we'll be good to go. Now the sanding process for this was pretty basic. We did 80 grit going all the way up to 220 grit. But there was this one issue that I didn't really have a solution for just yet. So there's this accident that I had when I was cutting the pieces. There's this little notch. So what I'm gonna do is go to the table saw and copy it onto the other side, just for this one, to see how it looks. So I just marked basically, I think it was like 6 millimeters up. I'm gonna run it on the table saw and stop it when the blade touches my pencil mark. See how it goes. Now I'm using my crosscut sled for this just to make sure that it's nice and square. I'm just lining it up with my blade, going up to where that mark is and then stopping. I did this for all, I guess, 4 sides, but 8 times. I mean, we'll sand it down and see what it looks like, but now we're going to continue the sanding and I'm going to skip this because of course it's not very interesting. And we're going to be using tung oil for the finish, but let's see what the final results look like.